this might be the hardest home I've ever designed. Not because it was large and not because it was expensive, and definitely not because the architecture itself was particularly complicated. It was difficult because before I ever opened Revit, I had to answer a question. What happens when somebody turns 18 and the system expects them to be an adult overnight? So a friend of mine runs an emergency foster shelter here in Texas, and over the years, she kept running into the same problem. So the goal of foster care is to provide stability and support and safety to children who need it. But eventually, those children, they become adults. And once they reach that age, they're expected to figure out housing, employment, finances, cooking, transportation, all the other responsibilities that come with adulthood. And some, they do incredibly well. But some, they need a little more time. And that got me thinking. As a society, we spend a lot of time talking about helping children. But how often do we talk about helping people through the transition into adulthood? Because if we're being honest, most of us don't figure out everything at 18. I certainly didn't. The nonprofit had been helping by renting apartments for some of these young adults, but they wanted something more intentional. Not just a place to stay, but a place to grow. A place where someone could begin building a life while still having support nearby when they needed it. And that's where this project began. At first, I thought I was designing housing. But the more conversations we had, the more I realized I wasn't. I was designing a transition. How much independence should someone have? How much support should still be available? How close is too close? How far is too far? If you were moving out on your own for the first time, what would you want nearby? Family, friends, mentors, or just complete independence? I don't think there's a perfect answer. But those questions became the foundation of this project. Like most architects, my first instinct was to focus on the building. I did different layouts and forms, different architectural ideas, and from a design standpoint, some of those early concepts were probably more exciting than what you're going to see. But there was a problem. Every dollar spent making the architecture more expressive was a dollar that couldn't be spent helping someone. And eventually I had to ask myself another question. What are we actually trying to accomplish here? Is the goal to design a beautiful building, or is the goal to create the most opportunities possible? Once we answered that question, the project became much simpler. Instead of focusing on the buildings themselves, we started focusing on the spaces between them. The site, it's organized around a central courtyard. 5 small housing units surrounded by a shared outdoor space. Each resident has their own home, their own front door, their own kitchen, their own bedroom, their own responsibility. But just outside that door is a community. A shaded place to sit, a place to meet a neighbor, a place to feel connected without feeling crowded. The goal wasn't to create dependence. The goal was to create support. And I think those are 2 very different things. Beyond the housing, this organization is also developing additional facilities on the same campus. We're currently working on a new foster care building as part of their overall vision for the site, and that'll probably become its own future video because there's a completely different set of design challenges involved there. But this organization is really creating opportunities for practical life experience. This includes spaces where these young adults can learn job skills, budgeting, cooking, or even how to operate a real business. One example is that there's a salon that will be run by these adults here within the program. Not a simulation or a classroom exercise, a real business serving real customers. And I think that's one of the things I appreciate most about this project. It's not just providing shelter, it's providing opportunities. Once the overall site strategy was established, I started working through these individual homes. And honestly, there isn't anything revolutionary about these floor plans. It's got a living room, a kitchen, bedroom, and a bathroom. Everything someone needs to live independently without adding unnecessary complexity. Because the goal wasn't architectural novelty. The goal was ownership. There's something powerful about having your own key, with your own kitchen, to your own place, even if it's small, especially if it's your first. I moved into Revit and began assembling the project. The buildings are intentionally straightforward. Simple forms with efficient construction and repeatable layouts. Not because we lacked imagination, but because every dollar saved on construction can potentially be used somewhere else in the mission. And sometimes good design isn't about adding more. Sometimes it's about understanding what matters the most. As the model developed, I found myself paying less attention to the buildings and more attention to the courtyard. Looking at the pathways and the trees, thinking about pergolas and shade and moments of reprise. Because when you think back to places you've lived, what do you actually remember? Is it the roofline? The type of siding that was used? The details on the window? Or was it the people and the conversations you've had and the feeling of belonging somewhere? I think architecture often gets judged by the buildings, but I think people experience architecture through their lives. And those aren't always the same thing. As we moved into materials and furnishings, I tried to approach them the same way we approached the overall project. Not by asking what looked the most impressive, but by asking what would actually support the people living here. The furniture needed to feel comfortable and welcoming, but it also needed to be durable and easy to maintain over time. These aren't luxury apartments necessarily, but they also aren't temporary dorm rooms. They're somewhere in between, a place where someone can begin building a home of their own. I also made a point of adding plants and greenery throughout the interiors. It's a small thing, but I've always believed that a little bit of nature can make a space feel more alive. A plant near the countertop, a small tree near the window, even simple touches like that can help transform a space from somewhere you stay into somewhere you actually want to be. And the material palette followed a similar philosophy. Simple, durable, and easy to maintain. The kind of materials that can stand up to everyday life without requiring constant upkeep. But I also didn't want every unit to feel completely identical. So while the buildings share the same overall language, subtle variations in the exterior materials help give each home a little bit of its own identity. Nothing dramatic, just enough variation that residents can feel a sense of ownership and individuality. Because even within a shared community, it's important that people still feel like they have a place that's uniquely theirs. So the final design, it isn't super flashy. It isn't iconic, and it's probably not going to win any awards, but I don't think that's the point. The point was to create a place where someone can safely take the next step. A place that provides privacy without isolation. A place that provides community without dependence. Giving support without control. And if it succeeds at doing that, then I think it has accomplished exactly what I was meant to do. Projects like this remind me that architecture isn't always about creating something extraordinary. Sometimes it's about creating something useful, something meaningful, something that quietly helps people build a better future. And personally, I think we need more projects like that. If you enjoyed this video and like to support more projects like this in the future, consider checking out my Patreon. Members get access to project files, behind the scenes content, and help support the continued growth of this channel. Thanks for coming along with me on this. Stay curious and design with intent.